So we are on week 2 of our new series, Mature Me, even though week 1 was 2 weeks ago, so a bit awkward, but that's all right. We had Brent do an interlude last week in baptisms. Who loved watching baptisms last week? I hate playing keys when baptism's on, guys, because I just get all emotional and then I make 20 mistakes like in a row because I'm crying too much and I can't see what I'm doing. So I had to lock in on keys last week, and hopefully that was all right. I apologise if you listened to the live stream and heard how bad it was. But in saying that, my name is Madison. I'm part of the family here at Revive, and it's my joy to speak with you guys this morning. So like I said, we're in week 2 of our new series, Mature Me, and this series is kind of a twofold thing, right? The first thing is that it's actually a prayer, a simple yet very dangerous one of God, would you mature me? And then the second thing that it is it's actually a question of asking ourselves, what would the mature me do? I wonder if we wore bracelets like that, like the WWJD ones. It's just what would mature me do instead. And every time you make a really terrible decision, you just look at the bracelet, you're like, dang. In saying that, when we ask ourselves those questions, the question of what would the mature me do, it actually takes maturity to already ask that question, right? Because it's a question that challenges our default settings. It challenges our flesh of what we want to do or what we want to say, and it's going to lead to different actions, which is why my message this morning is called The Challenge is the Change. Who loves it? Who's a note-taking person that loves it when there's a clear title of a message instead of having to make up your own one or guess? So this morning is The Challenge is the Change, and I think that it's important for us to talk about this sort of thing in church because change actually hurts, if we're being honest. Everyone wants to grow, but growth requires embracing the pain of change. There was this quote I really liked, and I had no idea where it was from, but I had heard it a bunch, and it says, change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. So change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. In full disclosure, this quote's from Tony Robbins. I didn't know who Tony Robbins was, so I had to Google who he was. So sorry if I showed my age just then, but I had no idea who he was, and I did research on him, and I'm like, his workout videos seem a little bit culty, but his quote's really good. So I'm going to use it and disclaimer that Tony Robbins maybe is a weirdo, but the quote is really good. So let's just take the quote, and if you want, you can quote it to me rather than Tony Robbins, so it feels a bit better. Anyways, it also, I think that this quote, I guess, is embodied in, there's a story about Michelangelo, the famous artist, and he's working on a new sculpture, and he's chiseling away at some rock, and someone kind of comes up to him and asks, hey Michelangelo, what are you doing? And he gives the most dramatic, poetic, but kind of cool answer at the same time. And he says, I'm liberating an angel from the stone. And I'm like, that's dramatic. If I heard a 13-year-old that's doing art at Pukekohe say that, I'd be like, hey, calm down, it's not that cool. But I guess because he's Michelangelo, he gets away with it. And I like it a lot because I think that's exactly what God is doing in your life and in mine. He's chipping away the unnecessary. He's shaping you into who he designed, and he's liberating you into the person that you're supposed to become. And I think God has to do this because, I don't know about you, but I sometimes find myself blending some of God's truths with the world's truths or with my own truths, and you end up with a bunch of half-truths. I think a really popular one is God accepts you just the way you are. And it's true to a point. It's not the full story. We serve such a good and loving Father, and he's so good and loves us so much that he doesn't leave us how he found us. He's not satisfied with leaving you there. He loves you too much. He's going to be like Michelangelo, chiseling away at us so that he can liberate the real you and the real me and the potential of who we're supposed to be. So if change doesn't actually challenge us, it won't change us. If God is going to change us, God is going to mature us. He's going to have to challenge us. It's like this verse that Craig shared in week 1, and I'm going to share it again this morning in James 1:2-4. It says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature, complete, not lacking in anything." God trains us through trials. God allows things in our lives like trials, like challenges, to chip away at us so that we might become mature. He's not doing it to harm us. He's not doing it to make our lives harder, but to train us, to prepare us for the growth and strength that we need in the future. Our troubles train us, and our challenges change us. The way God is going to liberate the real you, the real me, the mature you, the mature me, is He's going to allow us to go through some tough stuff and some difficulty. But when we know that the pain has a plan, the plan to liberate us, to turn us into the real you and me, all the potential that we could possibly have, when we know that, we won't quit under pressure. So when you feel like troubles and trials and challenges are arising, know that it's actually God working through your life. If He's ever going to trust us with something more, He's going to have to test us. He's going to have to trial us. I think of the parable of the 5 talents, of the talents, where He had to trial it. He had to test His servants in order to give them more. And I kind of think of a very cringy cliche. And I'm sorry if you like this cliche, but I find it really cringe. And that is, God gives His toughest battles to His strongest soldiers. Have you seen that? Have you guys seen that on like pillows or on like wall art or whatever, or Facebook? I find it really cringe, but there's a part of truth to it, so I've changed it to make it less yuck. And that is, God saves His most challenging assignments for His most trusted servants. If God is going to test us, He has to know that He can trust us. He's testing us so He might trust us. His most challenging assignments are saved for His most trusted servants. So through this series, we're talking about Joshua and his life and how we can see maturity through transitions. So to put us in context, in week 1, Craig preached a message called The Promise as the plan, highlighting a very pivotal moment for Joshua. And that is when he basically steps in as leader of Israel. He fills in the shoes of Moses, who is arguably one of the greatest leaders in the Bible. So it's a bit intimidating for Joshua. He's the man that literally helped bring all of Israel out of slavery. And then God's like, Joshua, you're out. I'd be like, pick someone else, please. This is like the worst job to fill in. It's kind of like when you do speech competition at school and the kid before you did really, really well. And you're like, dang, I have to go next. And so that's Joshua. I imagine that's what Joshua's feeling right now. He'd been Moses' aide, and now he's stepping into leadership himself. And I think what's awesome about Joshua's story is his maturity is shown in how he handles the transitions, and it's the same for us. God didn't give Joshua a detailed playbook. He gave him a promise. I will never leave you nor forsake you. And that promise is not just for Joshua, it's for all of us. When we step into new seasons, when we face significant challenges, we may not always know the exact steps to take, but we can hold on to God's promise that He will always be with us, and that is enough. In Joshua 1 and 2, we see that Joshua leading the Israelites across the Jordan River, just as God parted the sea for Moses, which is kind of cool. He's got his own little story of that same thing where God stops the flow of the Jordan so the people can cross. And God promises Joshua, I will be with you just as I was with Moses. And as Joshua journeys, he faces challenges just like we do. And today I want to show you 3 challenges we all face on the journey of maturity through Joshua's transition in his life. So the first challenge I want to talk about today is the challenge of habit. So we're picking up in Joshua 5. They've just crossed the Jordan River and they're now standing on the outskirts of the promised land. Joshua 5 verses 10 to 12 says, while the Israelites were camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, they celebrated Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the first month. The very next day, they began to eat unleavened bread and roasted grain harvested from the land. No manna appeared on the day they first ate from the crops of the land, and it was never seen again. So from that time on, the Israelites ate from the crops of Canaan. The Bible says that as the Israelites left Egypt with Moses, so we're heading back to Exodus, and we're walking towards the land of Canaan, what should have been a journey of only maybe like 40 days ended up being 40 years. And why? It's because the people disobeyed God, and He told that generation, because of your disobedience, none of you will inherit the land I have promised you. Only your children will. So now, 40 years later, a new generation are in the same space as where their parents and their past generation once was, except they were born in the wilderness, and they probably grew up as warriors fighting in the wilderness. But now they're stepping into a transitionary season, right? Because they're about to become landowners, kingdom builders. They're not wanderers in the desert anymore. They own the land. And what's interesting is that their parents' failures shaped them, but it didn't define them. They were still the people of God. The generation before them may have failed, may have made mistakes, but that didn't shape who the people of God were, was, will become. And I believe that this is such an encouragement to some of us in this room. It's not about where you started, it's about where you finish. It's about where you're heading towards. It's about where you end up. You may have begun in a bad place. You may have made mistakes. You may have feel like you're wandering for way too long. But God has a place in store for you. You might not be there yet, but God always comes through on His promises. Always. Plans may change, but God never does. So this is my encouragement, is don't give up. Don't be disheartened. Don't be discouraged. It's not about where you came from. It's about where you end up. Verse 12 says, no manna appeared on the day they first ate from the crops of the land, and it was never seen again. So from that time on, the Israelites ate from the crops of Canaan. So the Israelites are there. They've crossed the Jordan. They're on the outskirts of the promised land. And on that day, the manna stopped. Why? I think it's because miracles are for saving, not for sustaining. God shut the mouths of the lion so Daniel wouldn't be eaten, right? God miraculously provided flour and oil through Elijah to the widow so her and her son wouldn't starve. God used an angel to free Peter from prison so he wouldn't be executed by Herod. What I've learned is sometimes I can be so immature in my own walk with God that I ask him to do things that I can actually do myself. And I know you know people that do the same, even if you don't want to admit that maybe that feels like you. We hear things like, I want to grow in my faith, but have you been spending time in prayer? Have you been reading your Bible? I want Christian friends, but you know that person only comes to church when it feels convenient for them. I want to get my finances under control. Yeah, but you just buy the weirdest stuff on Temu all the time. I don't understand. How can you get your finances under control when your Temu bill is larger than your power bill? I want to handle conflict better. Yeah, but every time I try to have a hard conversation with you, you dodge me 20 times. I want to step into a new opportunity, but have you even reached out, applied anywhere different? Or are you just saying things? The mature me and the mature you recognizes that wanting change isn't actually enough. Maturity doesn't begin in wanting change. Maturity begins in stepping into change. From the moment that the Israelites got to the outskirts of the promised land, God said, I want to give you land to tend to. I don't want to give you miracles to live on. This is important. They're stepping into a new season, and their new season calls for new habits. It's a new season, and it requires new habits. And some people want a miracle for God, want a miracle from God, but they don't want to form a habit. In the old season, the Israelites had no choice, right? They're literally in the desert. I'm not a horticulturalist, but I'm pretty sure you can't grow anything there. So they had no way of growing crops, no way of providing for themselves. God said that God sent the manna from heaven for them every morning. But stepping into a new land, stepping into a new season meant a new way of living. The old miracle was for the old season. The promised land is the new miracle, but it comes with a challenge of new habits. 1 Corinthians 13:11, Paul puts it this way, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. Manna was for a moment. It was for saving them, not sustaining them. Manna was temporary. Now they're stepping into a new season where they have to learn how to provide for themselves. And God wants the same for us, and yes, it's really scary. And I think we see in the Israelite story, and sometimes we can see in our own, that there's a danger of clinging to the old. The Israelites had already seen what clinging to the old looked like in Exodus when they complained to Moses about leaving Egypt, right? They've just been freed from slavery, and they say to him, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? I'd rather be back in Egypt as a slave. It's better there than dead in the desert. Clinging to old miracles, though, like with the Israelites, they can keep us from stepping fully into what God has for us. And the danger is that missing manna in the promised land means that we could never even set foot there. It's time to transition into the new season. It's time to develop new habits. What are you missing today? Are you finding yourself clinging to an old promise from an old season? Are you so content with the old miracle that you can't hear God saying, I have new miracles for you? The new season requires new habits, and I really feel like this is a word for some of us in church this morning, that we've grown used to being fed, but now it's time to learn how to provide for ourselves spiritually. The next season might be the time when there's no one around when you need prayer. Maybe you're going through a little bit of an incubation season where things are really tough at home, but you can't just call up your pastor and get them to pray for you. You have to learn how to pray God's power into situations on your own. Maybe you have to open up the word and find a promise from God that sits in your heart because for whatever reason, the messages and stuff just aren't doing it for you. Or maybe you've got such a specific need that, I'm sorry, we're not doing a series on finances at the moment, and you need a promise for your finances. Maybe you have to look for yourself. Maybe you have to learn how to worship to a Spotify playlist rather than the band and the screen and the lights. Maybe you have to learn how to witness to others about the goodness of God, because who else is going to do it? This is the moment where God is calling us to mature. The Israelites had to stop depending on manna and start feeding themselves in the promised land. It's not that God doesn't want us to have miracles, He does, but He doesn't want us to cling to the old ones and the old seasons. He's got something new for you. Our first challenge was the challenge of habit, and our second one is the challenge of truth. Joshua reaches the outskirts of Jericho, but their first challenge awaits. They've done the Jordan. Would have thought it would be easy by now, but now they reach the city of Jericho, which has massive fortified walls. And am I the only person that thinks about WWE when I hear Jericho? Is it just like brainwashing me? Chris Jericho, shout out, great wrestler. Anyways, so the Israelites, they reach the walls of Jericho, and this is a problem. And just because you have a promise from God doesn't mean you're not going to have any problems. But here's the encouragement. If you've got a problem, it often means you have a promise. If you've got a problem, it often means you've got a promise. Problems are the chisels God uses to shape us. I've got all sorts of problems because I've got all sorts of promises waiting for me on the other side. And God is liberating me into the person I'm supposed to become. So we're going to pick up in Joshua 5:13 where we just left off, and it says, "When Joshua was near the town of Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, 'Are you friend or foe?' 'Neither,' he replied. 'I am the commander of the Lord's army.' And at this, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence. 'I am at your command,' Joshua said. 'What do you want your servant to do?' The commander of the Lord's army replied, 'Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy.' And Joshua did as he was told." This moment in theology is actually called a theophany. It's a visible or tangible appearance of God in the Old Testament. And these are moments where God reveals himself in such a way that humans can actually perceive him. Think of the burning bush and things like that, where it's God, but he's not like standing there. It's just like this weird bush that's on fire, a weird pillar of clouds. That's often a theophany. And they're there to often challenge, instruct, or guide us. But most scholars believe this is actually a Christophany, where the commander of the Lord's army is actually Christ himself. So Christ himself is present right here in this moment, right before the battle. And Joshua, who's supposed to be on a journey of maturity, asks every question that a child fighting asks their parents. Are you on my side or theirs? Whose side? Are you on Israel's side or Jericho's side? Because my side, I think you should be on my side. And he assumes that God actually is on his side. But God actually answers with neither. And this is the challenge of truth. The immature heart asks God or assumes God is going to back my agenda. The mature heart stops themselves and asks, am I on God's side? The immature version of me is always right. But the mature me has to admit that I'm wrong sometimes, and I have to be challenged with the truth. I think that this is like really apparent. I feel like once you get married, you learn how immature you are. Because there's moments where like Uti will say to me like, hey, listen, like you said you were going to do the dishes and you didn't do them. And then my instant reaction that I want to give is, well, you said that you were going to do this and you didn't. And what about that thing the other week and this and this and this and this and this? And just make it all about getting defensive, trying to explain myself and justify why I didn't do it. And honestly, it's an urge, right? It's like our default settings. We have to resist it sometimes. And you sit with it, you listen, you try not to say things in the back of your head. And you go, I'm sorry, you're right, I was wrong, that is what I said, I apologize, I'll get it done. And we all have moments like this, right? Where the immature me wants to double down, wants to, or ignore, or just like fight. But maturity means humbling ourselves and owning it, right? And we have moments like this where we have to resist the urge of the immature us, like wanting to get the last word in an argument, and you just like quickly close the door and run away so that you got the last word. Or pointing out someone else's flaws instead of owning my own. That's a classic. Or even pretending that we didn't see that text message because we just really can't be bothered today. Maturity is owning the truth in the small things so it carries through to the big things. It requires self-awareness, empathy, seeing both your strengths and weaknesses, but also humbling yourself to look at what others' perspective is. So we're back at this moment where Joshua is asking God himself right before the battle. Mature Joshua asks, are you on my side or theirs? Whose side, Israel or Jericho? And I think it's the biggest epitome of a human moment, because Joshua is literally commanded to lead God's people, and he's still looking for confirmation. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, literally could be no more signs that Joshua, you are the guy. And he's like, but am I the guy to God? And he gets asked this question, are you on my side or not? And the commander of the Lord's army, Jesus, answers, neither. And some of you might be thinking, man, I hate that answer too. If I was Joshua, that sucks. But the truth pierces Joshua's heart. And he falls down to the ground and he asks, what do you want your servant to do? Take off your sandals. You are standing on holy ground. God isn't on Israel's side or Jericho's side. He's on his own side. And that's the point. We have to ask ourselves a mature question. We can't be immature and say, God, please be on my side. The mature question is, am I on God's side? What do I need to do to get on God's side? Christianity isn't about us getting our own agenda accomplished. It isn't about me achieving my dream. It's about fulfilling God's dream, God's plan. That God's story comes first. So when I represent him, when I am called to be an ambassador of Christ, I don't get to ask, God, God, be on my side. God, you're on my side. I'm a representative of Christ. The question I have to ask myself is, God, what is your agenda? How do I line up with what you're doing and what you're speaking? I'm not trying to get God to agree with my words. I'm trying to get my words to agree with his. I'm trying to get my actions to agree with his. This isn't about establishing my own kingdom or even establishing Revive's kingdom. It's about establishing God's kingdom. And when you get confronted with the glory of God like Joshua did, when you get challenged with the glory of God, the response shouldn't be, he's on my side. It should be, am I on his side? When you are confronted with the glory of God, that moment when the shoes have to come off, you realize pretty quickly that it's not about my story, it's about God's story. And I think one of the hardest but most transformational challenges that we all face in our walk with God is learning to write your story with God as the main character. So we have to ask ourselves, am I on his side? Left to myself, I don't know about you, but I make some pretty poor decisions sometimes. But if we submit, if we let the truth challenge us, that's when we grow. Maturity requires us being willing to see ourselves accurately and realign ourselves with God's will. We have to let him guide the story, not us. The mature me, the mature you, isn't asking God to validate us and our decisions and our mistakes. It's asking ourselves, am I where God wants me to be? Am I doing what he's calling me to do? The last challenge that I think we all face is the challenge of obedience. I feel like this is like a lifelong challenge for me. I'm like, is there ever going to be another side where I'm like, just like an obedient, I need to go to obedience school. Obedience is the final challenge Joshua faces, and one I think we all face. Joshua 6, 1-5 says, "Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go out or in, but the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors. You and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. 7 priests walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to march around the town 7 times with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priests give one long blast on the ram's horns, have all the people shout as loud as they can. Then the walls of the town will collapse, and the people can charge straight into the town." And here's the thing about biblical obedience. I think it's 2 things that we hate as human beings. First is doing something we don't want to do. And the second thing about biblical obedience is that it's doing something that often we don't actually understand. Following Jesus is about obedience we can't explain. Obedience that stretches beyond our comfort zones. And I think that's when, the rubber really starts to hit the road in your walk. At the start of our journey with God, it's all sunshines and rainbows because, we're feeling God's presence for the first time and it's wonderful, and we do things like I love baptisms because I'm just I remember back to the start and how awesome it was and the beginning of my journey with God, and you get to worship, you get to find friendships, and it's awesome and amazing. But it's only awesome and amazing because it's everything we actually want to do. That's fun, finding community and finding new friends and, hanging out and worship. That's the fun part. But following Jesus is about an obedience that I don't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I don't want to do what God's asking me to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. God's battle plan for Joshua seems wrong. Not just strange, it just seems wrong. It's not going to work. March around walls silently, no swords, no spears, no secret tunnels, to get in underneath, no horse with Troy and stuff, hiding in the Trojan horse, none of that. No special little things, there's no need for weapons, maybe just some horns and the choir. And in plain sight of everyone in Jericho, march around these walls quietly. God's battle plan always looks different than our battle plan. I see it all the time when I hear people say, I'm going to resign from my job, and my boss that I love with only the Lord's love, I'm going to write a scathing email, attach it to everyone in the company, and leave. Whereas God's battle plan is probably, you're going to go in there, thank them for the job, for the opportunity, and bless him and his family. I see a terrible take on social media. My thumbs start twitching. I'm ready to go. I'm like, I can't wait to get in the comment section and prove this person that they're the stupidest person I've ever seen. And God's going, I think the battle plan is you just let it go. And we have these moments, right? I can't wait to get back at this person. I can't wait till they reap what they sowed, because we make it Christian, so it's better. But God is saying, no, I can't wait for you to forgive them. The battle plan of God is always different from our battle plan. And I'm quite a competitive person. And I feel like in the last few weeks, God's kind of been pointing on the fact that I can be quite a sore loser when I lose. Uzi and I have been playing PlayStation recently, and half the time if he starts beating me, I want to rage quit and turn it off. And I'm like, this is so stupid, this is the dumbest game I've ever played. And then I get all pouty and sad, and then he's like having the worst time, and I'm like, shame, that teaches you for beating me. But it's been quite embarrassing, right? I have a love to win. And I wonder how many of us don't fight like God wants us to, don't fight with his battle plan, because we don't think we're going to win. That's how often I see it. But God, how do I win? But God, how do I get what I want out of this? And God's saying, you don't. This is my battle plan. This is my strategy. It's not yours. And I think unless we start obeying God, I'm saying this as a friend, the problems in your marriage will remain the same. Your friendships won't deepen the way you want them to, and the church won't meet your expectations. We need to stay in community long enough to tend to the land that God's given us, to see the promise of God. But we often don't, because we don't understand the battle plan and we don't like it. His plan is different, his strategies are different, and I don't think I'm going to win. And so many of us, we're right there, we're marching as God told us to. We're just marching on the spot, and we're ready to shout. We want vengeance, we want recognition, we want accolades, we want advancement, we want to win. But man, it feels like I've been marching forever. How much longer do I got to keep marching? How much longer do I got to keep doing it God's way? This seems pointless. I'm trying to be faithful, I'm trying to be obedient, I'm marching on the spot, but it looks like nothing's happening. And I'm right there with you. I'm trying to do it God's way. Some of us just keep marching, and as we march, it feels like the walls in front of us look even stronger than they were before. It looks like there's not a single crack. It looks like they're not gonna fall. But God told Joshua 7 days, and I think sometimes we stop at 6. God told Joshua 7, and the temptation, the challenge is not to stop at 6. And I know it's hard. I know it feels silly, like you're just marching in plain sight, that you've got no weapons, that this is just the weirdest, strangest battle plan ever. But the challenge of obedience is that if God said 7, don't stop at 6. And when people ask, what are you doing? Our response is, I'm marching, I'm obeying God, this is how I fight, I'm obeying him, it's what my father told me, and for once hearing, because I told you so is enough. Could I just get the keys up, please? I find it really interesting that in verse 10, God only commands shouting on the 7th day. The first 6 days, it's silence. Verse 10 says, "Do not shout, do not even talk," Joshua commanded. "Not a single word from any of you until I tell you to shout. Then shout." Why silence? I think it's because Jericho, for Israel, it wasn't their problem. Those walls weren't their problem. The problem was their tongue. Their tongue is what kept them out of the wilderness. I kept them in the wilderness and out of the promised land the last time. And I think God's saying in this moment, basically, I am not letting you screw it up this time. Stay silent and march. Keep marching. Keep your mouth shut. There's a miracle in progress if you would just be quiet and do as I've told you. Don't let the cynicism get to you. If you'll just be quiet, victory will come. Keep marching. Be still and know that I am God. God fights for me. He's a fighter on my behalf. Don't stop at 6 when God has told you 7. It's the challenge of obedience. Even when it feels like suffering. Even when it feels like I'm just going around in circles. Even when it feels like this whole thing I'm doing is pointless. God sees beyond the walls, beyond the hills, into the promised land. And He's saying, keep marching and you will overcome. We get into the 7th day in verse 20. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horns, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. If you're new to faith, you wouldn't know, but if you've been around for a while, you'll know that the number of completion is 7. Obedience isn't just about starting, but it's about finishing faithfully. Step by step, in alignment with God's plan. Obedience doesn't depend on my feelings. Obedience doesn't depend on me getting the results I want or not. Obedience works only because God is fighting our battles. Believing, trusting, and not giving up until God's promises are fulfilled. The Lord fought their battle. Obedience works. If you've come into this room this morning, or maybe you're just in a season lately where it just feels like you're carrying a heavy heart, you're feeling discouraged, you're thinking, looking at your circumstances and thinking this doesn't make sense. There are walls in front of me that I don't think are going to move anytime soon. I want you to remember that with every lift of holy hands, every shout to God, even when we don't feel like it, we are tearing down walls. I don't know what that could be for you. I don't know what walls you're facing. It could be that walls need to come down in your marriage, walls need to come down in friendships and relationships, walls need to come down in your finances, walls might need to fall in your family. But when we worship Him, when we trust Him and obey Him, God is saying that we will overcome. Whatever wall you're facing will come down if you just keep marching. Don't stop at 6 when God said 7. I love if we could all stand to our feet and close our eyes.